Hey, what's up? This is Peter. Tonight I'm in Copenhagen in Denmark, and what we're talking about tonight is setting up your shot correctly in the right place, the place where you want to set up your shot, not the place where the location kind of forces your hand into setting up the tripod in the safest place, or maybe tonight the place that is the least windy, or the place where the sound is so bad because of the traffic behind me, maybe. Just these little things which push you to make these compromises on your sets, and the war between sound and visuals and getting the best sound in a shot, getting maybe a wider angle and then the best sound out of it. For me, this has been true tonight. You know, you come all the way to Copenhagen, you set up your camera, and then in a nice spot with a nice lights, you know, you go up there, there's no lights on at night. Maybe these ones will turn off like they did for me in Budapest. And my point is that you come all this way, you set up your camera, and then you can't do the shot because the bloody thing's changed. Or you're so close to the road that your sound guy goes, no, I can't do that. There is an answer to this, and the answer is probably from character. The answer is, what is most important to you? Is it the person in front of in this case, in the teaching video, is this, I'm so close to the microphone that the sound behind me doesn't affect it, whereas the nice visuals are kind of worth the compromise, the 50-50 there, because, you know, sound is supposed to be 50% of the film, right? But it's not, and to me it's more like 30. It's really kind of, I don't want to downplay sound because, you know, obviously we know it's so important. I used to say, in fact, someone would ask me, what do you think is more important? And I would say sound's more important. Of course it is, because, you know, they say you can forgive bad visuals but you can't forgive bad sound, and that is true. But we're dealing with a visual medium, and Hitchcock would agree with me on this. I know I look a bit like Hitchcock today, so I'm going with this. Hitchcock would agree that you know, with film coming from the silent era, we're dealing with the fact that sound has been pushed onto visuals, and that's kind of, you know, our way of emulating life. And, you know, film has been that kind of, when it's not art, it is emulating life to a degree in the scenes, in the kind of, even something like Better Call Saul, you know, where we've got this long form television in an artistic way, Breaking Bad, Mr. Robot. We're dealing with shows which, for the most part, have to emulate real life to a degree, because they're trying to fill out their seasons, and they have a real kind of, even in a show like that where they do have creative license to do quite a lot of character work and take things from the point of view of character, we are dealing with creative, you know, we're dealing with this creative effort in amongst these constraints of, it's got to be 45 minutes, it's got to be 50 minutes. Okay, so that's a little bit why your favourite TV shows, long-form TV, can't really be, I mean, maybe Twin Peaks. I haven't seen the David Lynch Twin Peaks series, the newer ones. But I know that the older ones managed to have a lot of art to them, and fair play to them for that. But, you know, we're not all David Lynch. We don't all get to do that. When you can, great. So what do we actually do to combat this, you know, visual team against the sound team? And aren't they just always at war with each other? If you've ever been a DOP or a sound recordist on a set, you'll know that there is kind of, you can sometimes feel a bit annoyed that the other party is kind of forcing their hand. I know as a DOP on quite a lot of sets that it comes down to, you will, you know, you get those dirty looks from them because you've said, no, I will not move the camera. This is my shot. This is the important shot. You know, I set up this camera for this shot over there, and if I'd have, you know, if I had a sound guy and he had any say, you might say, Pete, you're going too close to the road with this closer shot, but I actually prefer it for the background. As I've said, this is the most important combination for me at this time, and really that's what it boils down to. Is it your shot to do with character? I mean, it should be, but is it character in that the person on screen is the most important element to it? If so, can the background not suffer, but have we got multiple choices of where to put the camera? and then maybe the sound will have an easier time with that. You know, you can see I'm already being biased towards visuals because I have that kind of Stanley Kubrick photographic mind, as opposed to maybe someone who is obsessed with sound. And there are people who you should really get on your team who are bang on with sound. That's what they care about, and hopefully they'll fight their corner. You want someone who's going to fight their corner for all teams, but when it's a war, it is a problem. It should be a kind of discussion of fuck you, buddy. It should be a discussion between the sound guy and the visual guy. That's my point. You know, you get sounds which interrupt the dialogue, and you know, if you're gonna shoot in public, you're gonna get people coming as well. So, you know, you have to deal with these problems, and you have to be ready for them and accept them for what they are when they come. You're always gonna get the plane flying overhead. So, you know, I mean, when Martin Scorsese made Taxi Driver, he had those background sounds going on throughout his scenes and, you know, throughout the dialogue, because we're shooting inner city New York. And with a director where most of his scenes are shot in inner city New York, you're going to get that background sound quite a lot because of the city. Of course you are. The point is, how are you going to hold on to those visual storytelling? Because are you going to let the city dictate where you put your camera? No, of course not. But are you maybe going to set up in a position where you screw yourself? Of course not either. You know, it has to be that middle ground that is, you should never sacrifice the frame. I mean, what's in the frame or what's happening, these are the most important things. You know, if you have your shot and kind of compromise at the last second, if you move maybe an inch, it's going to change the shot completely. So these are things which you cannot compromise on to that degree. You can't say, oh, the beam's in shot, so I'm going to move the camera like an inch that way. It's not going to work. You're going to ruin your shot. That cinematographer has set up that shot perfectly, he thinks, for that scene, in the kind of perfect place for the character. Through his eyes, he's seeing that world, and, you know, where that frame ends and where it begins is exactly where he wants it. Now, most cinematographers, myself included, will set up a shot and we will know that there are 5 million other choices we could have picked. Maybe we can go back in a minute and change it, especially if the sun comes in. But if we find one that we're happy with as regards character, that we think is pure cinematic gold, which isn't all the time when we come to, you know, a cold location, we just want to get through it. I think that you've got to have all of this in mind in order to go for your shoot and know that, you know, there is not a battle between you and the sound guy. There is merely, well, how close can sound get? How, you know, what other choices will the camera have regarding the fact that there is no sound in this dialogue scene at all? So if you're coming from your scene from a point of view of this film is more kind of artful in its cinematic language than it is, say, like, you know, a dialogue scene like, say, Before Sunrise or something, or even let's take a film like Good Will Hunting, which focuses on the scenes of actors, you know, doing their best performances and playing their best characters. This is a film in which, like traditional films, which you are very familiar with, most Hollywood films are like this, you get that dialogue scene between two actors, or even a group or whatever. You get the dialogue scene, right? And in maybe kind of more experimental, artful films like, say, The Third Man, even though there are dialogue scenes in that, so it isn't a hard and fast rule that, you know, you go arty, it means you can just do a Andrei Tarkovsky and just, or Wong Kar-wai, and just plant in all the art that you can and look at it from that point of view, the David Lynch point of view, where it's all art, it's all from dreams, it's all kind of a little bit, you capture the shots and then you put maybe a voiceover over, or you add in the dialogue afterwards to go as a kind of voiceover behind the camera in a kind of dialogue way, you know, like Stalker does, you know, or Solaris does. You can have that element added in afterwards, which, you know, at our level is really easy to make films that way because it removes a lot of the problem and adds in a lot of the art, which is really all you've got as a kind of low budget filmmaker. So really, that is the main battle that you're doing, maybe for your career, if that's something that would you think about. But if mainly even for making artful films, that is something you should really consider. But when it comes to these dialogue scenes, when it comes to two people talking on screen, really, it's gotta be you've gotta have that chat, as I keep saying, with the sound guy, and you've gotta know where to get in. You've gotta have the time as well. You can't let people push you to just, yeah, I'm ready to go. You've gotta be kind of ready to say no, ready to say, I'm not happy with this, we gotta go over here, we gotta, even if it takes half an hour to reset this one shot and we only get this one shot, at least then you've got something that's filled with purpose, rather than something which you've just done spontaneously or just kind of accepted because it's a compromise. I think the one thing that really has to be stressed here is that you've got to have that critical conversation with whoever is in charge of what department. That is kind of, you notice there is a lack of, whilst you're still, doing your own job, and that's someone else's job. Sure, you don't want to kind of step on people's toes, but it is important to have that critical conversation with, say, your DP or your sound guy, or if you were a DP or sound guy, with your director, and say, look, this is what I'm dealing with. We're having a problem with the light, we're having a problem with this. I know this is kind of the vision that we set out for and discussed it. Hopefully you've discussed it and gone to the location prior, even though what's going to happen is the light's going to change by the time you get there on the day, and you're not going to, maybe there's a lot of rain and that's affecting the sound. I know that's a bad example, but there are things which, construction sites for example, you might have that on the day, and so isn't everything fucked then? If you have a construction site, if you have these things which just crop up and annoy you, and how do you get around that? And you got to make last minute decisions and kind of improvise in order to get around it. I think there is no generic answer for this, apart from you've got to be able to adapt and think on your feet and actually talk to people and tell people. You can't just maybe keep it to yourself, like you wouldn't want a nurse in a hospital to keep it to themselves, or a doctor to keep it to themselves if they see something's going wrong, or maybe the co-pilot on a plane or something. You wouldn't want them to not speak up. So you've got to speak up, because it is important. People are out here, maybe they're going to get ill from this shoot, because of how cold it is. I could get ill from this. But it's important to not waste everyone's time by not speaking up a lot of the time. You'll get a lot of praise for it. Maybe you won't get any praise at all. But I think people notice and respect people who do speak up. The last thing I want to talk about is how to set up your shot in that kind of Stanley Kubrick way. And I'm not talking about in the style of Stanley Kubrick. I'm talking about the intention that what's in the frame is so important, and that is your kind of art. If you're using a static tripod, you are being very careful about what you're actually keeping in the frame. If you're going handheld, you're kind of finding shapes a lot of the time, and that isn't a strict rule either. I believe that is a very logical way of coming towards shoots, whereas there is a character way. With the logical way, like finding shapes, you're just gonna, a lot of the time, yes, you'll be creating some kind of painting with lines, and that is a part of photography, sure. And you're painting with shapes, of course you are, another part of photography, but basically you're not talking about character. You're not photographing from a point of view of what is it that the character kind of not wants me to, where do I want me to be, but where do you feel most comfortable being? With actors, you'll find a lot of the time, because actors are indeed light, they're shapes on the screen. If you take your camera off the tripod and kind of search around during rehearsal for the best place to put the camera, maybe you can move them mechanically, maybe you can cheat in that way when it actually comes to the shoot. Perhaps sometimes you can't, and when you can't, that's another thing as well. You need to be able to talk to your actors and tell them where to actually stand and where to, and to do things mechanically, to move the furniture around the room. Another critical conversation, you can't be shy about actually telling actors and maybe taking them by the shoulders and moving them. And sometimes when it gets to that point, or you can't be afraid to go in that close to the actor, which this is a very close frame a lot of the time, and actors get very kind of put off when they're here, but as you see on the frame, it's not as close as that, right? That is close. But my point is really about if their nose is touching the lens, it's on a wide angle lens like this, you've got to know that the actor's not really going to know how close they are actually. They think this is so close, but a Wong Kar-wai shot, this is kind of standard. I know that Kubrick, if he was still alive, he would put the camera wherever the fuck he wanted. He would take the camera and put it underneath Jack Nicholson just because he would get between his legs, and he would do it that way, in The Shining. And, he would swing the camera back if he wanted to get that X-swinging shot that is so famous. And, this is why we love his cinematography. We love, I forget who the actual cinematographer was on Kubrick's films, but I know that with his eye, I'm sure there must have been a creative effort from them. I'm really probably offending the cinematographer, but with Kubrick's already cinematic photographic eye, he really doesn't need much help in where he's going to put the camera. We think the same of Wes Anderson as well, in that kind of, we know that there is a distinct kind of signature to the way that they make films and the way they shoot films. So, and it's partly because he has that vision, and vision's a very word which, it's a throwaway word for a lot of people because it's like being an auteur filmmaker. How pretentious, right? But really what we're talking about is having that signature, having that don't give a fuck, this is my way or the highway attitude. There's the right way of doing it, the wrong way, and the way that I do it. And you put the camera where you want to. And I feel like a lot of people don't. A lot of people just accept that it's, this is how normal films do it, and I myself have suffered from this. You get to a set, you set up the camera, and you're kind of happy with that, but you're not, and you're not going to say anything because you've put the time in to set it up here. It's here. Maybe it would have been better over there. Do we know? Do we have time to explore all the options? No, of course we don't. We got to find the best one for us. Now, if you want to see a lot more of these videos, if you want to see my topics ranging from character to cinematic language to atmosphere to sound to score composition to anything from the philosophy of filmmaking, from just films that you maybe should be watching, I go through all these topics like really in depth quite a lot of the time, and what I'm trying to do is build this kind of like full curriculum of different topics which can be really explored and really kind of, as time goes on, just kind of mastered and dissecting each film one by one, including my own work, including the stuff that's going forward on my own journey. So if you guys are going on a similar kind of journey and you need someone to follow and to kind of work along with and to kind of be a kind of mentor figure for that, then I realise I'm just inviting myself to be your mentor, but this is what I'm planning to do. for that, I'm going to need some money. I'm going to need to be able to fund going out to places like this. I'm going to need to be able to fund making my films, and this is what I want to do for a full-time job. This is, honestly, I love doing this. So, if you want to give some money and actually get access to these videos, I went to Boston, I went to New York, I went to Philadelphia, I've been to Vienna, I've been to Prague, I went to all these fancy places. But the reason why I went to these fancy places is because for a start, I wanted to go on a holiday, but I also had to teach there. I had to show you guys absolutely that I am dead serious about this, not just as like a, this is how you set up a camera, this is how you want to be, using the triangle of exposure and all this, and whilst all of these technical things are important, and almost, cinematic language to like a mid shot, medium shot, long shot is important. 3-act structure is important, right? But the fact is that, a film can be open-ended, so what the fuck is a 3-act structure? The fact is you can do whatever the fuck you like, really. It's just how it's judged in retrospect. Was it good in retrospect? So, is it an artistic piece? And if you guys agree, why don't you join up? Why don't you actually, go down, press the link, and, find these videos, pay for them, and get access to them. And I'll really appreciate that, and I'll be able to make more of them, and I'll be able to, fund doing them maybe at a higher production value. Maybe I'll get some kind of shots of films going on in the corner at the time as well, and that'd be really cool to be able to dissect films as I'm talking about them, maybe. And we shall see where we end up. But the only way I'm going to be able to do that is if I get a little bit of support, and you guys are going to get some great content because of it, because I will just not stop talking about film and the stuff I have to talk about, the philosophy, the depth that I want to go to. And this is like, I'm going into my own psychology, let alone, a filmmaker's kind of how far you can go with cinematic language and the philosophy of how you make a film. It's like, is there just one way to make a film, or is there multiple ways, or is that whole there's multiple ways thing a big lie? So click the link, get those bloody classes going, and you start now. We'll both build up our knowledge together. I encourage fucking comments which are gonna talk about this, which are gonna talk about, how we can go a bit further with some of these ideas. I'm working it out the same way you are. I'm learning just as you are, just as smart as Scorsese is still learning now. I want him to be on this channel talking to him about, what the fuck is film doing now? Where do we go from here now that the greats have come and gone, and now the new greats are here? And now we've got digital, and it's all a bit different, but it's still going to the roots of cinematic language and philosophy. It's like, what can we do with this? Where can we go?